All right, guys, today we are going to be talking about algebraic properties. They are not very exciting, I'm going to tell you that straight up front, but they are essential when you are solving equations, and they explain why you do the steps that you do in math problems. So first ones we're going to start with, these are called the duh properties because I'm going to have you write them down and you're probably going to go, duh, I already knew that, hence the name. But you should have a piece of paper in front of you. Now yours isn't folded yet. I forgot that I needed to give you those instructions first. So first thing I want you to do, fold your paper in half like a hamburger. Okay, crease it right over here in half like a hamburger so you can open it up like a book. All right, then you're gonna open that back up. You have a fold down the middle, and I want you to take the two edges and you're gonna fold it to meet that middle crease like a window pane foldable, okay? Once you get here, the next thing that you're going to do is take a pair of scissors and you are going to make 3 cuts on each flap. So you have 4 different flaps to open. So let me show you before you start cutting. So we're going to cut 3, just eyeball it, you don't need to measure it. So 1, 2, and 3, okay? So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 on each side. You're going to do the same thing on the other side. 1, 2, and 3. And again, it doesn't matter if they're exactly the same size or not. They don't need to be perfect or anything like that. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. The first property that we're going to start with is the reflexive property. So I'm going to write this down on the top left up here. You may need to pause this video in order to keep up with the writing, but you see how it's going to work. So your reflexive property, I like to think of that as sort of like a reflection. On the inside, I'm going to write a description here. This says that both sides look exactly the same. Okay? So that's your description of it. One side looks exactly like the other. Obviously, you're like, duh, I know that. So an example of this would be maybe A equals A or 5 equals 5. A lot of these properties you're going to see when you get to geometry especially, and when we get to the properties of equality later on, those are the ones you use when you're solving equations. Okay? All right, so reflexive property here. The next one is your symmetric property. Okay, symmetric property here over to the right. And this, my description that I'm going to put here is that there is a line of symmetry, meaning it's almost like reflected across. If you were to fold it down the middle, it's exactly the same. So for example, if A equals B, we also know that B equals A. If I were to draw a line down the middle, these would fold up and be exactly the same thing. So that's why you can say something like x equals 5 or 5 equals x. Both of these mean the exact same thing. Again, duh, you already know that. Okay, I'm going to keep going over here. Now this is going to be the transitive property. And then while I've got this open, I'm going to say 0 property here. Give you a second to write those down. All right, the transitive property is not one you see super often in algebra. Again, it's way more common in geometry. The transitive property is the one with the middle piece. Okay. An example of that, let's see, A equals B and B equals C, therefore A equals C. So X equals Y, Y equals 2, so X equals 2. So by middle piece, I mean this one right here. Again, you don't see it super often, but there you have it. Super fun stuff so far. Okay, your zero property, This is also called the zero product property. That might help you remember it a little bit better. And this just says anything times 0 is 0. Duh, we know that. So I'm going to say any number times 0 is 0. And whether you have a variable like a times 0 equals 0 or 5 times 0 equals 0. Again, you guys know that. The hardest part of properties is memorizing them. You know all of these things in the middle because they're going to make you say, duh. I already know that. But this is your zero product property. Remember, product meaning multiply. Okay? Moving on down here, let's see. We have the identity property of addition. We're also going to have the identity property of multiplication. So you can go ahead and write that on the other side. All right, and these are your properties that I like to think of them as they keep their identity. They keep exactly who they are, whether you're adding or multiplying, okay? So what that means in words over here is a number plus 0, is that number. Let me move that over. So something like a plus 0 equals a, or 5 plus 0 equals 5. Again, duh, we know that. So you can probably guess your identity property of multiplication is any number times 1 is the number. Okay, any number times 1 is the number. So something like a times 1 equals a, 3 times 1 equals 3. It's important to remember here with your identity properties that the number doesn't change. That's what I was saying earlier about keeping your identity exactly the same. So we started with 5, we end with 5. We started with 3, we end with 3. Okay. The last two on this foldable, we have the additive inverse and the multiplicative inverse. Say that 5 times fast. Multiplicative inverse. There we go. Okay. So up here you had your identities. Down here you have your inverse. I'm guessing you know that inverse means opposite. So what we're going to do over here is on the inside is this is any number added to its inverse is 0. So an example would be like 7 plus -7 equals 0, negative x plus x equals 0. You might even have like 8 minus 8 equals 0. Down here in this example, you're technically adding the opposite. Remember, adding a negative is the same as subtracting, okay? And then your multiplicative inverse, over here, says any number multiplied by its reciprocal is 1. Remember, reciprocal, that's a little bit hard to read, sorry. Reciprocal meaning you flip it over. So like 1/3 and 3/1, or we could say 2/3 times 3/2 equals 6/6, which is 1. Okay? A little note for you down here is that inverse means the opposite. Okay, so I'll give you a second to finish that. Your homework tonight has all of the dub properties and some of the essential, which we're going to do in just a second. If we don't finish it, or if you guys don't finish it in class, you may have a little bit of time in the morning to work on it, or whenever you come into class. But know that you will be grading tonight's homework tomorrow by the end of class, okay? So here's this foldable. Again, pause it if you need to. This video will be on my webpage.